Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Shane Cullis, Vice President of Membership Development at the Oakville Chamber of Commerce. Today, we'll be hosting a discussion on accessibility in the workplace. MP Pam Damoff will be moderating the discussion with Louie DiPalma and Mark Wafer, who will be introduced shortly. We are also joined by Dean Weeb from the Toronto Sign Language Interpreter Service. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that Oakville is on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations. I'd like to now welcome MP Pam Damoff to the forefront.
Thank you so much, Shane. It's my pleasure to introduce our guests, Louie DiPalma and Mark Wafer. It's also my pleasure to join you today to talk about the economic impact that employing those with a disability can have for business. It's more than just doing the right thing. Louie is the Director of SME Programs and is responsible for developing and implementing initiatives of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce that are designed to strengthen the business climate of Ontario. During his career with the Government of Ontario, Louie held a number of senior management positions in policy, planning, and direct operations with several ministries, including the Ministry of Tourism and Recreation, and the Ministry of Health Promotion. During his 25 years in business, Mark employed over 200 workers living with disabilities in all areas of operation, including senior management. As an advisor to the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario, Mark is responsible for Canada's National Disability Employment Strategy, as well as the reform of basic income for Canada's disabled. A prolific connector of people, Mark has raised almost $60 million in the disability and broader nonprofit sector. So Louie and Mark, thank you for joining us today. I want to begin by getting a better understanding of the demographic of people living with disabilities in Ontario. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? I don't know that we have an order, so maybe Louie or Mark, maybe We'll go to you first, or Louie, who wants to take it?
Sure, I can jump in first if you like, Mark, and then you can jump in as well. As we know through Stats Canada, roughly 22% of Canadians have self-identified as having some form of disability. About 29% have some kind of visible disability, whereas the other 71%, it's a non-visible disability. That's why when we talk about disability, when we talk about providing services, we suggest that you don't make assumptions. You don't, because you don't know. It's really important to ask questions to make sure you're providing the proper kind of service to meet the need of the individual. I could further break that down into various types of disability. Again, this comes out of the Stats Canada from 2017. Pain related is about 14%, flexibility at about 10%, mobility roughly 9.6%, mental health 7.2%, and vision 5.4%. So that's a pretty good, identification of the types of disabilities that we have within the jurisdiction. Mark, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Louie. Those statistics are stark because the society at large is not generally aware of how large the demographic is. But the demographic of disability is actually the largest minority group in the country by far. The 22% that Louie mentioned is actually the entire population of BC, Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan combined as a percentage of the population of Canada. So we look at it that way, it's absolutely huge. And 50% of those, according to Stats Canada, 50% of those individuals are not working. However, that's a pretty conservative number when you consider that you actually have to have marketplace attachment in order to be counted in unemployment numbers. So the unemployment or not working number or percentage for people with disabilities in Canada and in Ontario is probably closer to 65, 70%, 85% if deaf, and 88 to 90% if you happen to be autistic.
And Mark, if I could add to that, when you talk about folks not working, this is a highly skilled demographic. As we, are on this call today, in Ontario alone, we can quote numbers as high as 60,000 folks, in our colleges and universities. This is post-secondary education that have identified as having some form of disability. So, highly educated, great skill sets. And as you know, in the current times we're in, and even prior to the pandemic, talent is a key issue for businesses out there. They need the right talent, the right time to expand and grow. So certainly, this demographic can offer many benefits to businesses that seek the talent from this talent pool.
Yeah, it's good. In Canada today, we have 450,000 recent graduates who have a disability who have not worked a single day. Of those, 270,000 have a post-secondary education. So to your point, Louie, these are educated people. These are skilled people. These are the exact people we need in jobs today in Ontario.
I think Mark got frozen there for a moment. Just before we go on to the next question, I'll say the one thing that the statistics don't include are those people who have stopped looking for work and those people who are underemployed, which is quite prevalent within the disability community, of people who, as you mentioned, may have a university degree, but are working well below what their university degree qualifies them for, because that's the only employment that they can have. So statistics don't necessarily tell the whole story. And I wonder if we could maybe, Mark, I'll get you to start on this one because of your experience as a business owner. How can the hiring process, what are the benefits to including persons living with disabilities in the workforce? And is there an economic case for inclusion? I know the answer to that, but.
So Pam, that's a very important question, because when businesses make the decision to employ somebody who has a disability, they often ask themselves, well, how does this benefit me? What's in it for me if I'm going to hire somebody with a disability? How does my organization benefit from this? There is a clear business case. And when we were in business for 25 years with 14 Tim Hortons in the city of Toronto, we hired almost 250 people with disabilities, every type of disability, every position. And we discovered very early on that there was a clear economic case. Absenteeism was lower. Employee turnover was much lower. The innovation factor was much higher. And that's something that employers don't really think about, is when you have somebody who's a wheelchair user or uses a service animal, for example, this problem-solving skills are completely different to ours. And innovation in the workplace is created by hiring ordinary people who have different problem-solving skills. And so there's others too. There's the safety factor. Person like myself who are deaf, I can't exactly run across the road without looking. I have to be more aware of my surroundings. And so having myself as a deaf person working in a factory or a foundry or a loud environment, I am actually a more safe worker because I am more aware of my surroundings. And so there is a clear case. And if you take a look at the absenteeism alone, companies that build capacity of people with disabilities in real positions for real pay, they show absenteeism rates for the disabled workers as much as 85% lower than those who are not disabled in the same workplace. And it's scalable. So for myself as a small business operator, I'm around 85%, but also big organizations, corporations in the United States have also reported the same exact percentage.
Yeah, and Mark, if I could add to that, we've conducted surveys at the annual surveys at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce as part of our membership group, and we have roughly 60,000 businesses, business members across the province, and invariably every year, one of the top issues that our businesses identify is that need for talent. So, so when you're talking, the stats that we've talked about, 22%, highly educated, great skill sets, can we really afford not to tap into this labor pool and access this talent to help our businesses grow and prosper. It also, the research also shows that innovation increases at a company that hire people with disabilities, simply because, if you hire 10 people like me that sit around the table, you're going to get, my information and my views 10 times over again, right? If we get ourselves involved in diversity hiring, then you're going to get, a real variety of thoughts and ideas around that table, which increases innovation. And we all know that increased innovation leads to productivity gains. And we also know that whether you're competing locally, regionally, or internationally, it helps us to become a more competitive organization in the marketplace.
So it's not just good for the bottom line, it's good for innovation, and it's the right thing to do. So one of the challenges I know is that people may not even apply for a job because of the way the job description or the ad is written. So how can the hiring process be modified and adapted so that it's more accessible and inclusive, so that you are, as an employer, you are getting people who are looking at your company as a potential place to work? Louie, maybe we'll start with you this time and then go to Mark.
Yeah, I think it's important to think about, before you actually place your ad, being inclusive isn't an afterthought. Okay, it has to be built into the environment and to the, kind of culture of your organization. So prior to placing that ad, take a look at that ad. We all do this, right? We have a job opening. We used to go into the filing cabinet and pull out an old job ad and then change the dates and post it. Now we go into the electronic filing cabinet, we change the dates and post it. What we really should do is take a look at that job ad, make sure it still resonates for the job that we're actually hiring for. How many job ads have we seen where it's an entry-level position and they ask for 3 to 5 years experience? I don't get that one, right? If it's entry level, where are these folks going to get this experience? So take a look at your job ad, make sure it actually matches what you require for the position. If there's certain types of credentials you're looking for, look at skill sets. Don't necessarily look at the credential side of it. Like how many ads have we seen, you need a driver's license? How many ads, but there's no driving with the job. So this is something that we need to take a look at. We also need to take a look at how are we structuring those interview questions? Are we making sure that they're accessible? Or how are we structuring the location of the interview itself? Is it accessible? Are we noting at the bottom of our job ad that we are willing to accommodate folks should they ask us, so that we can provide that accommodation during that interview process? So we can do those things in advance so that the individuals understand that we are an inclusive employer. We're looking to break down barriers. We're looking to tap into this labor pool.
Mark?
Yeah, Louie, you're absolutely right there. So what we're trying to do in business, and what you need to do for your business, is to create a disability confident workplace. And the way that you do that is through awareness, especially when you come to the departmental managers and HR department. You want them to become disability confident and create a cultural change, which takes some time. But you've got education, you've got awareness. One of the easiest things you can do when you start to target the disability community, you've got that huge untapped workforce, potential workforce, but we have to tap into it. People with disabilities typically will not apply for a job if they can't do everything that's on that job description, because they've been told no so many times. They've been turned down so many times. And so if they don't think they can do everything on that job description, they simply won't apply. You have to look at business. You have to look at the job description, look at the way you advertise, and say, does this work for the disability community? For example, boilerplate job descriptions almost always indicate you have to have a driver's license. But do you really need a driver's license for the job that you're hiring for? Because 50 to 60% of people with disabilities, they don't drive. They don't have a driver's license. Half of them can't afford it because of their socioeconomic situation, and the other half, because of their disability, they physically are unable to drive. So you're reducing more than half of that massive untapped labor force simply by having that one quote in the job description, do you have a driver's license? So you've got to look at that. And the cultural change takes time, but it starts with awareness and education, especially at the management level.
Louie, you might be best prepared to answer this just as a follow-up on that, is if you're a small business owner and you want to change the way you're advertising, you've watched this, and is there any place that you can go to say, this is the ad that we were going to put out there, can you take a look through this? So sort of like big companies will have an accessibility advisory committee or department, but if you're a small business, you probably don't have access to that. Are there places where these small businesses can go to get that help to make sure that they are putting out feeler advertisements for people that will attract people living with a disability?
Pam, absolutely. You're spot on in terms of small business, right? The president of these small businesses, they're doing 17 things at the same time. They don't have HR departments. They're trying to keep their lights on, keep the payroll moving, keep the revenues coming in, serving customers. So, it's important that there are assistive places that these small businesses can go. Now, I can make a plug for a program that we run at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. You've given me a good opening here. It's called Discoverability, and there is a website, discoverability.network. On there, there's actually a hiring roadmap that we've put together, especially for small businesses. Mark, in the day when we used to chum together and do more presentations together, he provided input to this. We had a bunch of businesses came together. We had stakeholders come together. We put together the hiring roadmap. It's a 6-step process that the businesses can tap into. They can get either a little bit of information or they can get a lot of information depending on their needs. They can also attend webinars that we run. We run weekly webinars to help businesses better understand the hiring process for persons with disabilities. There's also a matching platform there as part of this network where persons with disabilities that are looking for employment can actually put their resume into the platform, and then the algorithms will match them with businesses that are putting up targeted job ads specifically for this demographic. So that's just what we're doing, but there's a whole host of organizations out there beyond what the Chamber is doing. There's service providers in each community that work with the demographic. They help businesses, plan their job hires and their ads. So there is support out there. And if you don't know where to get the support, I guess the only place I would direct you initially is go to discoverability.network. And then if we can't help you, we will direct you to the service provider in your community that can help you with those supports.
That's terrific. So what are some examples of accommodations that you've seen implemented in the workplace, and why is the adaptability of technology accommodation important? So 2 questions there. Mark, do you want to start us off? I can't remember who did it first last time.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Pam. Accommodation, it's important to know that only a small percentage of people with disabilities actually require accommodation. It's around 35–40%. And the average cost of an accommodation or an adjustment is under $500. So there is that myth out there that the accommodations are very expensive and that everybody needs one. That is not the case. The most common accommodation is actually extra training. So in our business, if we hire someone with autism, or someone with Down syndrome, or somebody who had some other sort of cognitive disability, they might take longer to train. And that's okay, because you're getting a great employee at the end of the day. You might have to do the training in a little different way. So you're accommodating that. Most of my training was actually online. That didn't work so well for somebody who was autistic. So we would have conversations, and we would do on-the-job training. The outcome is the same. You get a great employee, but you're training a little differently. So that's an accommodation. Physical accommodations are not as they're more rare. You don't have to do physical accommodations as much. Sit-stand desks, changing the way you access a building, creating ramps, those types of things are rare. If you find the right employee and you need to do it, you absolutely have to do it because you get a great employee out of it. And the cost, again, is quite low. The adaptability is huge. And if you go back a couple of years, when municipalities had to create their own accessibility advisory committees, and one of the first things they did was we have to have curb cuts on the sidewalks for wheelchairs. Well, that's all great, but you know who's using them most? Young families with strollers. That's who's using them. So the adaptability is very important. One particular young man that I found a job for in a factory, we actually had to create a template for him to put together an item that had 40 pieces. So we created this template for him, and then he would start to put it together because he didn't know which piece came first. He did such a great job that the company contacted us and asked to order 40 more templates, because this person who was using the template was a faster worker and more productive than the other workers who weren't using templates. So the adaptability of accommodations is huge.
And Mark, that's so true of many, many employers to whom I've spoken, that when they make that accommodation, they find out that it's actually better for all of their employees, not just the person that they've made the accommodation for. So whether it's, you know, the template, or whether it's meaning that a colleague of mine who's was a United Church minister, when they made their front entrance accessible for wheelchairs, similar situation, they found out that young families were now coming to the church because they could bring the stroller in. So you basically have opened up the doors. Did you want to make some comments on accommodations there, Louie?
Yeah, I'm going to add maybe a stat, okay, that comes out of some of the research. And the stat is this: that 25% of companies report the savings of between $20,000 and $100,000 because of effective accommodation. Okay, so that's a pretty good stat. And when we talk accommodation, I like to say that employers have been accommodating forever. Okay, this is not a new concept. It's not a new construct, right? Because that's what employers do. We want to create an environment which maximizes the contribution of every employee to the organization for which they work, right? So the very first time when someone walked into an employer way back when and said, listen, I need to go to the school today because you know, I need to do something with my child, that was an accommodation. The employer said, absolutely, flexible hours, great accommodation, you know, because that's really what it's all about. It's about taking a look at our workforce, taking a look at their specific needs, and arranging our processes and our practices in a way which allows everyone to maximize their contribution to their fullest potential. And that's what creates a stronger top line and a stronger bottom line, and helps create healthier communities at the end of the day.
So if I'm watching this and I'm an employer, how can I access this market? How can I turn my company around and say, I am going to now actively reach out to the disability community, and how can I access this market? So Louie, you had mentioned some of the work the Ontario Chamber is doing. What are some of the other things? Louie, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, I would say that you need to make, because you see, we all have certain specific ways that we recruit as organizations, right? Because we're comfortable, they're in our comfort zone, especially if you don't have an HR department. And even when I've talked to folks at HR departments, they also have their recruiting, you know, techniques that they favor, right? It's take a look at what you're currently doing. Okay, take a look as how do you want to change that process? Because if it's not meeting your talent requirements, then you can't keep doing the same thing. It's just not going to work for you. So, and we know the case through the surveys right now, and especially now through the pandemic, right? You know, I talk to businesses every day, and really it doesn't even matter what industry anymore. I know some industries have been hit harder than others, but the number one issue is, how can I find talent? You know, we've just held 6 or 7 focus groups, and every one of these groups with businesses, what are they telling us? Where can I get the talent, whether it's entry-level talent, mid-level talent, or, you know, higher tech talent? It's all there. It's a full spectrum of needs. So the companies need to take a look at what are they doing and then make those adjustments. So they also need to take a look at any unintended barriers that they have in their organization to tap into this labor market. Extremely important, right? So you prepare the environment properly, you make sure there's no unintended barriers, you take a look at how you're currently recruiting and where you're recruiting from, and then you tap specifically into this talent pool. And again, I will plug discoverability again, because that's what the entire effort of discoverability is, to connect businesses with persons with disability that are looking for jobs. But I would also turn to the service providers in their community. I can't list them all, right, because I don't know what communities, but there's many service providers across Ontario. They work with this talent pool. They help train the talent pool. They help them with they'll help you. And this is another big piece for companies. You know, they think sometimes, you know, I hire someone with a disability. Okay, I'm good to go. There we go. I've tapped into the labor market. There's a whole onboarding and a retention piece there. And the supports are out there for these organizations that they can tap into through their local service providers or through the discoverability network that can help businesses with that whole retention side as well. Because it's, you know, it's one thing to hire me. It's another thing to keep me, right? It depends on the kind of environment you create for me and the opportunities you create for me. It doesn't matter what demographic I come from. So I strongly recommend that the business take advantage of what's there in their own specific communities.
Yeah, and here in Oakville, I've done a lot of work with Community Living Oakville for those with intellectual disabilities, and they have job coaches that will help find the job. Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital, there was a young man with autism who really wanted to work at the hospital. Took a long time for them to get him in there. He's been supported by a job coach. They have now hired, I think, 4 people through Community Living, because the first one was the one that, you know, broke that barrier, got in there, and they were so pleased with the work that Curtis was doing that they have now hired additional employees through Community Living. So I think it's important for employers to know that they're not alone in doing this. It's critical for them to know that they can have support depending on what the position is. So Mark, what about how any other suggestions on how to access this market?
Well, the culture change within the company begins with representation. And you see that with that example that you just gave. You know, they hired one person and now they've got 4. So the representation really helps drive that. But companies have to target the talent. They have to target the talent within the advertisements and the procedures. Have to reach out to the disability community. They have to understand that it's a competitive advantage. If you're doing this and you're hiring people who are disabled and your competition down the street is not doing it, you've got that competitive advantage. So you've got to market the disability community directly in your advertising. If we drive down the street today, you'll see every store with a help wanted sign. And it says, help wanted, apply within, walk-in interviews. That's not speaking to the disability community. If you just change a few words on there, we are an inclusive employer. People with disabilities are encouraged to apply. That speaks to the talent. And that's how you get people with disabilities to say, hey, I think that company may be disability confident, I'm going to apply.
Well, and Louie, you touched on something, and I think this is an opportunity for employers. During the pandemic, the number one thing that we're hearing right now is we're coming out of it, and I hope we're continuing to come out of it. I can't access labor. There is no labor out there. And I keep saying to them, actually there is, you're just not looking in the right place. And I think it's an opportunity for employers to tap into a market that they have not been tapping into in the past. And in return for doing that, they're going to make their business better. They're going to as you said, increase innovation. They're going to increase their bottom line. It's just going to be a win-win all the way around. So I think that's all the time that we have for today, although I could keep talking forever with you gentlemen. Thank you so very much for this discussion. It's it's critically important to change perceptions and really make our workplaces truly inclusive. There's a difference between accessible and inclusive, and what we need to strive for are inclusive workplaces. So I'd like to thank Dean for providing the interpretation for today's event. The Oakville Chamber, thank you for hosting this. And I know the Oakville Chamber will be posting links to various resources, including discoverability. So be sure to access those. And a big thank you for our panelists, Mark and Louie, you were terrific. Shane, thank you for putting this together in the Oakville Chamber. And that will be it for today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.